the topic today is how to consistently get around sales objections. Let's just jump right in. Want to start out by actually just kind of laying the framework or the groundwork for what exactly objections are. I guess if you've signed up and you're attending this webinar, you either have a knowledge of what they are, but just a level set. Objections are basically your prospect's stop sign that they'll put up to try to take a conversation in a direction of their choosing. These can come up a lot on cold calls or when you're talking to a prospect for the first time, at which a direction of their choosing might be to end the call. And if you've made any prospecting calls, you might have heard some of these before, but I'm busy right now. Who are you with? What is this in regards to? I'm not interested. Just send me some information. We already use somebody for that. We're not looking to make any changes right now. We don't have any budget or money to spend. Those are some examples, and I would assume that most of you all have heard one or many of those before. In the SalesScripter world, we kind of refer to all of those as standard objections, and we call them standard because regardless of what you sell, you're going to face and hear those. When you change your product or change companies, that doesn't impact whether or not those come up. Those are standard. But what you can add to your list of objections are what we call custom objections. So those are objections that are specific to you and that are specific to the product that you sell. And an example of a custom objection or a product-specific objection that we face at SalesScripter is people find out that some of the tools we provide are sales scripts, hence the name of our company, SalesScripter, and people will say, well, sales scripts aren't good, or we don't like, or people say scripts don't make you sound good, and so that's an objection that we get a lot of the time, and we have to have a custom tailored response to that, just like you have to have a custom tailored response to your objections. Another example of an objection might be you might sell some sort of software and switching over is too time consuming or too difficult to your software. So that's an example of a specific objection to your world. What we're going to do is we're going to give you a clear methodology on how to respond to these and any other objections here today. But first, I just want to tell you, by you taking time out of your day to either watch this in a recorded version or taking time out of your day to sit in with us on this webinar, you've chosen your time wisely. And the reason why is because this is a critical area. Being able to identify how best to respond to objections can drastically improve your results. And if you take of some of what we're going to provide you here today, you can see an immediate improvement of your results. And the reason why is you're likely to face some sort of objection on almost every cold prospecting call that you make. They can come up a lot in sales meetings. So if you just sort of, if you're currently just shooting from the hip, winging it, trying to think of a response in real time, and if you go from that to having a clear response, either prepared or a clear game plan for how to respond, you'll immediately improve your results. And if you're a sales manager or a business owner and you focus on this area with the way you train your salespeople, you'll see a big improvement. So I guess the message there is if you were going to do one thing for either yourself or for your sales team in terms of trying to drive sales improvements, I would say focus on how to deal with objections. And that would be if I were to tell you either what to do first or if you were only going to do one thing, it would be this area. Now the good news is that there are really only 10 objections that you're going to consistently face. Most of those I just showed on the slide before, and those are the same ones that come up again and again. And so the ones that I showed before, and then you could probably add like 3 or 4 product specific objections that are specific to your world to that list, and that's it. And that is really a fairly small number if you really think about it. in terms of objections to prepare for. So if you just simply list out those 10 and have a game plan and maybe responses or an idea how to respond to those built out ahead of time, you're going to drastically improve your game. You're also going to probably improve your mental fortitude in terms of your mental strength, right? I mean, if you think about maybe a boxer getting into a ring and just getting punched in the face again and again, they're going to get beat up. But if that boxer knows how to dodge the punches or put their gloves up to protect the punches, they're going to be a lot stronger. They're going to be able to compete at a longer, higher level, and you could use a number of different metaphors there. But it's tough. You face objections so much, and when you get them and you get shot down, that's not fun. And so when you go from basically being beat up, figuratively speaking, to knowing exactly what to do and to getting around those, you're going to drastically improve your mental strength and when you're prospecting. All right, so enough of that. Let's just jump right in. Let's get to what you really care about, right? Which is how to handle objections. And there are three ways that you can handle an objection. You could comply, you could overcome, and you could redirect. To comply is basically to give in. It's to concede, that to basically say the prospect's right with whatever they're saying. So if they say I'm not interested, it's kind of like saying, okay, well, sorry to call you, I'll let you get back to it. Now this is the weakest of the three options, so definitely keep that in mind. But do keep in mind at some point you have to comply. Just yesterday, I was on a call with a salesperson, and I maybe stay on cold calls without hanging up. Without completely hanging up on the salesperson. I'll go along with it, maybe a little longer than most people because of the business that I'm in. But I'm also a nice guy, and I know how difficult cold calling is. So we crossed a point where I should have hung up on this sales guy because I was giving him basically the I'm not interested objection, and it's not a fit, and it was legitimate. I knew I wasn't blowing the guy off. There was no way I was going to purchase what he was selling. Anyways, the point here is that he kept trying to overcome and he would not comply. And I even got to a point where I said, listen, I mean, at any point, how far do we have to go before you accept what I say? And it was like he was almost not listening to me. So the quick point there is at some point you have to comply. Either you're beginning to waste your time, or you're beginning to damage rapport with someone. Like if you do not accept their objections and it goes on beyond a point, you're going to begin to annoy the person and begin to damage any rapport you may have. So there's really no point to just continuing to go on and not give in to the objection. So the rule of thumb that I like to use is you try to do 2 or 3 things before you comply. The next objection handling option is to overcome the objection. So this is it's to basically change the prospect's mind. It's to diffuse, to resolve the objection. So if the prospect says that they're not interested, this is kind of trying to basically making them interested. Now what I want to point out with overcoming an objection is that this is a fairly challenging thing to try to do. You're basically changing someone's mind. So that's a difficult thing really in any context, whether you're selling or you're in a discussion or an argument. So, and to change someone's mind, you need a certain amount of attention and time to work with so that you can build your case. So it can be the overcome approach is fairly time consuming to really try to do properly. The other thing is that when you try to overcome, you do give a little bit of life to the objection. So if a prospect challenges you on something and then you spend, let's say, 10 minutes talking about it, well then that gives a little bit of energy and attention to the objection. So it can make it a little bit stronger if you're not successful at diffusing it and successful at overcoming the objection. You might end up giving more life to the objection because there's more energy being put into it. The third objection handling option is to redirect. And this is basically, think of it as like a deflection, a segue. We are going to acknowledge the objection, and then we're going to try to redirect the conversation into a different area. Most likely it might be a related area, but we're going to try to get away from directly talking about that and trying to challenge and overcome that objection. An example is someone says, I'm not interested, responding with something like, hey, I understand. Do you mind if I ask you real quick, what are you guys doing in this area? So then the prospect most likely will answer that question. And at that point, the conversation is no longer centrally focused on I'm not interested. The goal of the redirect tactic is to basically keep the conversation going, and so there's a few different areas that you can redirect to. We're going to give you some real examples on how to redirect and where to redirect, but you can redirect to some of your pre-qualifying questions. You can redirect to your value statement. You can redirect to some of the pain points that you help to fix, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. But what I definitely want to show you is, I just showed you the different options you have, and the key thing to be aware of, depending on where you are in your discussion with a prospect, may impact what way you try to handle their objection. So on the left side of the screen are some of the stages that you might take a prospect through, especially early in a sales cycle. So you have your initial the initial time that you're speaking with them. This could be on a cold call. It could be me talking to them at a networking event. It could be on an inbound call. This is typically a 2 to 5 minute conversation. The next stage is when you're talking for real. This is a meeting or an appointment. Now, I do want to point out, sometimes these first two stages could happen at the same time. You might call someone and you end up talking to them on the phone for 15-20 minutes. Those two stages happen at the same time. Me personally, depending on what you sell, I like to break them up. Like once I kind of am able to close the prospect on talking in more detail, I like to put some time on their calendar on another day. So the goal of that very first stage is to get to the second stage, and the third stage is sort of giving a presentation, a demonstration, maybe providing a proposal. Depending on what you sell, sometimes stage 2 and 3 might be all in one. Typically you cold call and then you're giving some sort of presentation or demonstration after that. But the point here is, let's get back to dealing with objections. So those are the stages. Now, I mentioned the goal of stage 1 is to get to the meeting. And in order to determine if it makes sense for us to meet, I typically kind of want to pre-qualify the prospect. So that's not necessarily determining is the prospect is the deal for real in terms of they have money, they're the right person, they definitely need what I have. That's really fully qualifying them. I want to just pre-qualify. I mean, are they in the general area where it makes sense for us to talk? So, and bear in mind that first conversation is 2 to 5 minutes. So what I do not want to do in that first initial contact is I do not want to try to overcome the objection. A couple reasons why. I don't have the time. I don't have the time to overcome the objection. 2 to 5 minutes is not enough time for me to build my case as to why the prospect is wrong and why I am right. Also, part of trying to overcome the objection is it's also part of really fully qualifying the prospect, meaning if the prospect has an issue that's going to prevent them from buying your product, you do want to identify that, and you do want to deal with that head on. But I don't need to deal with that in the cold call, because that's not really part of pre-qualifying. Pre-qualifying is determining, are we in the general area of it making sense? And so we can be in the general area of it making sense without really investigating as one area where they might have a major conflict. So what I'm trying to say there is that there's no need to try to overcome in the first cold call, the first initial contact, but we do maybe want to bring overcoming the objection in once we get to the appointment, the meeting. Now the reason why is because, well, there's a couple reasons why we can add this to our arsenal. And one is because we have more time and attention. We have 15, 20, 30 minutes, maybe more if we're kind of consolidating our presentation and meeting stages. But we have the time to really get to the objection, deal with it, and yes, deal with it head on to see, is this a valid objection and should we close the file? But that's the time to do it. So I don't know whether I'm going into too much detail there, but the key takeaway there is that don't try to overcome objections on cold calls. Just redirect to keep the call going so you can close for the appointment, and it's when you're on the appointment that you can potentially really try to deal with objections head on. Alright, so let's go through some examples of redirecting, right? And so think of these as situations that you come up with during phone prospecting attempts. So the objection listed here is, what is this in regards to, and is this a sales call? Now, these are very common objections that gatekeepers will give you, and you can also get these from the target prospect as well. These objections are what I would refer to as screening objections. They're really looking for you to say something that identifies you as a salesperson. That way they can know, okay, I need to get rid of this person. What is this in regards to is one of a gatekeeper's favorite questions to ask. And so what you don't want to do is, I guess, like the comply response to these would be to say, well, either yes, this is a sales call, or to say, well, I'm calling to schedule a meeting, I'm calling to have an introductory conversation. Anything that basically actually kind of says what you're calling to do would most likely is going to be complying with this objection. So we don't want to do that, and we don't want to do that because it basically alerts, get rid of me. But now, so you might say, well, if without looking at this slide and without talking about this, if I were to tell you not to say that, you might say, well, what should I say? I don't want to lie. I don't want to say, no, I'm calling to ask about an invoice, and then it ends up being a sales call, right? So but what we do is we redirect to our value statement, and your value statement is a one-sentence statement that communicates the value that you offer. So an example of a response to what is this in regards to is I might say something like, hey, well, yeah, the reason why I'm reaching out is we actually work with chemical companies and we help them to improve their inventory turnover by 20 to 25%. And I'll just stop. I'll just stop talking. Now, that technically, like if a gatekeeper asks you what is this in regards to, that doesn't necessarily answer their question, but they're not going to call you out on that. They're not going to say, and why, it's almost like a curveball. The gatekeeper, they're not going to ask you what to further. They might ask you another question, but they're not going to be puzzled why you did not kind of give them what they're looking for. What they're also not going to do is they're not going to flip that switch that automatically, it's basically like the eject button. Like if you think about a James Bond car with the button that you push and the passenger seat flies out the roof of the car. They're not going to push that because they're not going to know to. It's almost like you're answering them with something that they're not prepared for. So they're either going to ask you another question, which helps you to reach your goal of keeping the call going, or they're going to say, okay, well, hang on just one moment. And that happens all the time. So there's an example of redirecting with your value statement. You can also redirect to your pre-qualifying questions. So the same response we can use here to 4 different, or and maybe even more, different objections. So in the objection of I'm not interested, we're not looking to make any changes right now, we do not have any budget or money to spend, call me back in X months or weeks or whatever. These are basically kind of, blow off, these are all kind of I'm not interested category type of objections. Now the overcome here would be to try to sell more, right? Oh, well, to try to make the person interested. Oh, well, but we have a guarantee, a lifetime guarantee, and how important is that to you? Do you want a lifetime guarantee, right? So that's trying to overcome. Again, we don't want to do that during that initial contact. So what we do is we redirect to your a pre-qualifying question. So that might sound something like this. Hey, yeah, I understand, but if I could ask you real quick, are you currently using any automation tools to manage your inventory levels? And at this point, most likely, there's a 90% chance that the prospect is going to answer that question. And then what you've done is you've gotten away from them saying I'm not interested. Now another version of that, and this adds kind of a diffuse statement, and you could add this in depending on your personal style, or it adds another sentence, so depending on how much time you feel like you have to work with. But you could say something like, oh yeah, I understand, and hey Bob, listen, I want you to know I'm not calling you to try to sell you anything or sign you up at this point. But if I could ask you real quick, are you currently using any automation tools to manage your inventory levels? Now, what I want to point out, when you ask this question, most likely they're going to answer the question. And so what you can then do is you can then follow that up with another question, or they may give you an answer that allows you to go for the close. Let's say that we have a saying that we use called a ding 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 answer, or a ding 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 moment, kind of like when you hit the jackpot at a casino. And so if you get the ding 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 answer to this question, you could go for the close. So they might say something like, oh yeah, no, we don't use any automation tools. Oh, well, that's why I'm reaching out, because we actually work with companies and we help them. And so you start to talk about yourself, and then you go for the close. So there's a lot of different directions you can go, but the key thing again is you're getting away from the objection, you're redirecting, and you're getting the light shined off of that position. You can also redirect to common pain points. So if we look at those exact same objections, another direction to go is to say something like, oh yeah, I understand, Bob, but listen, when I actually talk with other manufacturing companies, they often express challenges with it taking too long to process orders, and that there are sometimes errors in their orders. Do you ever see any of that, or can you relate to any of that? Are you concerned by any of those? So what I just did there is, in that sentence there's 2 different pain points. It taking a long time to process orders and errors in the orders. So he's saying we're fine. I'm giving him some problems and seeing if he has those. So another way to respond. Now another objection that comes up a lot is just send me your information. Now prospects love this one, because one is, a lot of prospects don't enjoy being a bad guy. They don't want to hang up on you. So the just send me some information objection is really popular because it's for 2 reasons. One is it's extremely effective at getting rid of salespeople, because there's a glimmer of hope. A salesperson is getting shot down, and then someone says send them your information. So it's really effective. The other reason is a prospect can get rid of you without breaking your heart and without sounding like a jerk. So it's really common. Maybe you've come across this one before. What you don't want to do, especially just at the first time you hear just send me some information, is to end the call and to spend 20 minutes crafting your long email with all your information and then sending it to a prospect which they're going to delete unread. Total waste of time, and that's the ultimate worst way you can go. The other thing is, this well, I want to point out this objection can actually come up at two different times. If it happens really at the beginning of a cold call, where you've barely had a conversation, they don't really know much about you, and they're saying, hey, just send me your information, they're blowing you off. And so the response that I like to use for that is something like this. Hey, yeah, sure, I'll definitely send you some information. So I know exactly what to send you. Do you mind if I ask you real quick, are you currently using any automation tools to manage your inventory levels? So right there, that's a redirect to one of your pre-qualifying questions. Again, you would insert your pre-qualifying question instead of the question that I'm talking about, inventory levels. That's just an example if that wasn't clear. The other thing is that if you don't know what your pre-qualifying questions are, or what the questions that you should be redirecting to are, that's something that we actually help with as well at SalesScripter. Be sure to check out some of our videos on YouTube, and the SalesScripter tool software will actually help you to develop the optimum list of pre-qualifying questions for each product that you sell and for each audience that you communicate to. When you change the audience, the product you sell may stay the same, but when you go from selling from one industry to another, or one department to another, one size of business to another, sometimes your pre-qualifying questions should actually change, or they could be changed to really operate at a high level. So SalesScripter can help you with that. But the point here on this objection is, yeah, of course you can redirect your pre-qualifying question for this also. If you haven't noticed to see a pattern so far, even knowing we're dealing with different objections, and there's 10 of them, most of them go back to the same exact place. So we don't have to, our objection responses, we don't have to come up with 10 different responses. We just need to know where they all redirect to, and most of them kind of go back to the same place. And it's already these questions should be maybe in your cold call script, even that you get to, even if you don't have to face an objection. So not only do the objections go back to the same place, but the call script and the objections go to the same place. So we're not giving you a whole lot to really memorize and understand here. I mentioned that the just send me information can come up a couple different times. It can also come up at the end of a call, right? Let's say you've talked to a prospect for 2, 5, 6, maybe even a little bit longer minutes, and then you go for the close and they won't commit to a meeting. I mean, at this point, you've kind of maybe asked them some questions, you've talked a little bit about yourself, and they're still not willing to take a meeting. This is less of a blow-off and more of a that they're kind of non-committal. They're not ready to commit to that next step in your sales process. So you could this would be maybe an okay time to comply, or maybe put together that email with your information. But if you want to give it one last try to kind of close for the next step, you could say something like this: hey, sure, I definitely can. Actually, there's a lot of information that I could send you. I might not know. You might need to tell me where to send the truck. That's kind of a joke, and it's not actually on this slide. But actually, there's a lot of information I could send over to you. But Bob, if you have some questions in particular about anything, to be honest with you, it might be easier and quicker just to have a brief call to go through your questions, to talk about what you're wanting to see information on, and I can explain it to you or show you that exact information, and we can schedule that for another day instead of me sending over a bunch of information that you would either have to go through or might not make a lot of sense for you all at once. Are you sure we can't put a call on the schedule for next week? So that's sort of a redirect back to a close. Kind of an overcome, actually, there, an overcome attempt. Sometimes you want to redirect to direct questions, which and this could be used for we already use somebody for that. Now, I mean, if somebody says we already use somebody for that, you could actually still redirect to your pre-qualifying questions, because that still might be a productive conversation. They say we already use somebody. Oh yeah, well, how concerned are you about this? And so you have some different pre-qualifying question, which not only gets away from the objection, it gets away from the discussion of the competitor. You can do that, but sometimes you want to just kind of hit that dead on. And again, we're not trying to get them to change who they're using. So we might respond with something like this. So they say, "Oh yeah, we use Tiger Tech for that." Oh, good. Hey, how long have you been working with them? And then they might answer that. How's everything going? Hey, what product of theirs are you using? What do you like about them? Is there anything you need that they aren't able to provide? Is there any functionality that you need that isn't in their system? And so there you could do this on a cold call, and it's not necessarily trying to overcome. You're not trying to say, "Oh, they're no good. You got to check us out," right? To talk about you and sell you over the competition would be trying to overcome. But you are sort of redirecting to direct questions that ask about the competition. Another thing that I sometimes say when the competition comes up is, "Hey, that's great, and I'm not calling you to try to get you to make any changes right now and to switch over. I'm just more, wanting to open the dialogue." And so that open the dialogue language that I was just referring to is displayed on this slide here. So I'll just flip to this next objection because you'll kind of see how that sounds here. But we're not looking to make any changes right now. So that's actually kind of similar to we already use somebody. We're not looking to switch providers right now. So a response to that could be something like, "Hey, I understand, and I want you to know we're not trying to sell you anything at this point, and I don't even know if we're a good fit." What you could insert there is, we're not trying. If they say they're already used somebody, you could say, "And I'm not trying to get you guys to make a change or switch over to us." Really, honestly, our goal really at this point is to simply open the dialogue between our two companies, so that if you reach a point where you are ready and looking to make a change, you will know who we are and you'll know what we have to offer. And so we, just looking back at the text here, actually what I might say before that last sentence there where you kind of go for the close is something like, and that way you'll know who we are and what we have to offer. That way, when you do reach it, when you are looking to make a change, you can reach back out to us. And so if we could put a brief 15-20 minute call on the calendar next Tuesday or Thursday afternoon, it would be, even knowing we're not expecting you guys to make a change, it would be really productive for us to learn more about you, what you're doing, and share a little information about us. Does that sound like something we can do? So again, one thing I want to point out, going back to an objection that we face in that people say scripts aren't good. If you notice, I did not read verbatim what was on the screen when I was giving that example to you. And that's how I recommend people use scripts. You use it as a guide. You use it instead of just having a blank screen in front of you, or just going through all the thoughts in your head. You use it as a guide, and you use your own words and your own personal style, and you kind of fill in the blanks. And so that's how we teach people to use scripts, more less as something you read from and sound like a robot. So I would encourage you, if you use any of these responses, to do that yourself as well. You use your own personal style. Even knowing I wrote this, even when I read it out to you, I still add a little bit more inflection and a word here and there. Moving on to the next objection, we don't have any budget or money to spend right now. So that's something that can come up often. If that comes up early in a call, you could respond to, and I think we actually listed that earlier, where you could redirect one of your pre-qualifying questions. So you're just trying to get away from the mention of money. But let's say you've gone through your call, you've asked them a bunch of questions, you go for the close, and they say, "You know what, it won't make any sense for us to get together because we don't have any budget this year." I mean, I hear that all the time. And it's realistic, right? I mean, they think They're not trying to be a jerk. They know you're a salesperson, and they don't want to waste your time, so they tell you, and it's the truth, right? I mean, most of the time, if you reach out to someone for the first time, they weren't planning to meet with you or to talk to you or to look at your product, so it's very common that they don't have budget in the year that you're calling them or whatever. That's very realistic, and in their mind, they're thinking, I don't want to waste this guy's time. And what you kind of need to educate them on is that, yes, so if they could need what you have, but they don't have money, they are pre-qualified. But if they don't have budget to spend, they're not fully qualified. So what that means to you is that they are worth you spending 15 to 20 minutes of your time for a meeting or an appointment, but what they might not be worth is you putting together a proposal or a demonstration or flying out for a presentation or whatnot. So you need to educate them on that. So a response that I sometimes say is, hey, I understand, and I want you to know we're not trying to sell you anything at this point, so it's okay that you don't have budget to spend. Really, I'm reaching out to you to kind of establish a dialogue and conversation between our two companies, so that when you reach a point where the budget is available, you'll know what we have to offer, and then you can reach back out to us, or I might check back in with you down the road, and then we can pick up where we left off. I respect that you're not going to be wasting our time, but since you don't have budget to spend, just to learn a little bit more about you, to share a little bit of information about us, will be productive if we just do that, and then we can kind of plant the seed so that when things change on your side, we can be more productive. That would be a very good use of our time. So even with us knowing that you don't have any budget, what do you think about putting 15 to 20 minutes on the calendar next Tuesday or Thursday afternoon? So that's sort of the education of it's okay, and to try to get around the budget or money objection. All right, so that was a lot of examples on how to redirect. Now remember, actually some of those might have been close to sort of overcoming. Actually, the ones at the end, you're not necessarily resolving their issue, but you're overcoming to close for the appointment. But once you get into the appointment or the meeting, then you might want to try to overcome the objection. And so here are some tactics to do just that. And the first is to focus on your differentiation. So this is how you differ from, like, if your objection is something like, we already use XYZ Corporation for what you do. Okay, great. But by the way, that objection, I already gave you redirects in the other section. So these are going to be to deal with that objection head on. And again, this is in the meeting. We're at the table. We have more time to work with. So we're going to deal with this head on. So the response here could be something like, and I'm not actually going to read this because the response would be different depending on what you sell. But this is where you go through, and you might say something like, oh, yeah, okay, well, we differ from XYZ Corp in a few key ways. And those are, we're easier to use. So you don't have to provide any formal training. You just hit the ground running. You can install our system without any professional services. I guess if they already use XYZ, that might not be a great one. But the point is, you go through the key differences, and so you're educating the prospect there, and that's just one of the ways to deal with that. One thing that I actually like to do before I begin that part is I like to actually compliment my competition. So I might say something like, oh yeah, XYZ, yeah, I'm very familiar with them. They actually have done a good job in this area. So I compliment them, which that does I personally think that does a lot of really cool things. What that does is that establishes a level of first of all, it displays me as being incredibly confident. If I'm able to give a compliment to my too many C words here. If I'm able to compliment my competition, that gives me a lot of confidence. So say that five times in a row. And confidence, it can be really good for building rapport, building trust. It can display me more as a consultant and an advisor instead of as a sneaky, questionable salesperson. So again, so I'll say something like, oh yeah, XYZ, really familiar with them. They've done a really good job at this. But some ways that we differ is that we're a little better in this area. We've done this, and here's another difference. So that's a way to kind of deal with that objection. Another thing is another tactic is to get to the root of the objection. A lot of times, and this goes for really when people either complain about something or have an argument with you or disagree with you, they might say something, but the root of what they're saying is actually something slightly different. For example, somebody might have the objection of, you guys are too expensive, okay? And try to understand what is driving that feeling or that concern. And so you want to get to the root of that. And because, for example, too expensive could mean they don't have any extra enough budget to spend on us, or they think that our product costs more than the value that we offer. I mean, those are two different things. For if I say you're too expensive, and that's because I don't have any more money to spend or enough money to spend, that's different than me saying you cost more than I will benefit from using you. Two totally different things. So getting to the root of what their real concern is pretty important, because when you get to the root, that can allow you to either to just address the objection. I mean, if you're kind of chasing your tail if you try to address the objection without really knowing what the real root of the problem is. Once you've identified the root, you can deal with that head on to build your case for why you disagree with them or why they're wrong or whatever. But what you can also do is you can isolate the objection. And so if someone says, if you're in the meeting or you're trying to identify whether or not to move forward, you're trying to close the prospect or whatever, but they're saying your prices are too high, identify if that's the only concern, because and I've faced this where someone said your subscription is too high with SalesScript, or your monthly subscription fee, and I'll go back to them. And this is sometimes done over email, and I'll say, well, is there a price where it would fit right with you? And they just go quiet, right? And the reason why they go quiet or they don't respond to that is because there's something else that's preventing them from moving forward. It's not the price. So when you isolate, so the way what the point here is if you kind of say something like, okay, well, so is the price the only concern that you have at this particular moment? If that were resolved, would you be able to move forward? And that's just a real powerful place to be, because you can either get a yes, and then that everything else is covered, and then you just address that one objection, or you might identify that there's still like 5 other things that they're unhappy with. Because if you say, so if we can agree on the price or fix that one thing, you'll move forward. And if they say, well, no, it's still, the ramp up time and installation is too cumbersome. Okay. Well, which of those concerns is more important, right? So then you kind of prioritize or deal with one at a time, but that's something you might want to do when you're trying to overcome or figuring out what the real objection is. Probably the best way to try to overcome an objection is focus on the return on investment, right? So if they say your prices are too high, focus on the return that they get for that investment. So you could respond with something like, yes, there is a cost with our service. I mean, we're a for-profit company, and I think you actually want us to be so that we make money and continue to make the product reliable and even better for you. You wouldn't want us to be a company that doesn't earn money. Again, reading sort of on my own words there off script, but But getting back to the script here, but it does, yes, there is a cost with our service, but it does help. Our system does help decrease labor costs by between 15 to 20%. Most of our customers actually receive a payback period between 12 to 18 months. So yes, you do have to pay something, on the front end to get all this going, but you will get that amount of money back in 12 to 18 months. If this paid for itself in a certain amount of time, or in that amount of time, would the price that we're asking for still be too much? So that's kind of a way to overcome that. The other thing is, another way to overcome is to provide alternatives, right? So they say, hey, your prices are too high. Okay, well, we do have financing available. So if the price is too much for you to, this kind of would come in. This would be a way to respond once you get to the root, right? So if you identify that the root of the problem is that the amount of money to spend today, like for pricing to be too high, it could be that they don't have money available in their budget. Well, what if you get something taken? What if you are able to free up something that the budget is currently spending on? That could change that. Maybe when they say your prices are too high, they mean that they don't have the money to spend today on what it costs for your service. So that's a different route to that main objection. Another objection could be that they don't. They need the payments spread out over a period of time. So if you got to the root to find out that they don't have the money to spend today, but they could make monthly installments, provide alternatives. We do offer financing options, and it breaks that lump sum down into monthly payments that you could pay over an 18-month period. If you had that option, would that keep this conversation going and make this something that you could consider? The next tactic is something that I've been taught. I was taught this in a sales training program. I personally don't. I really don't like a lot of either manipulative sales tactics. I'm real big on sort of being a consultant, being an advisor, communicating effectively. I think that this is a little bit kind of manipulative, and so I don't use this. But I do think the basis for this tactic, it all comes from a good place. So it's feel, felt, found. So if they say they give you an objection. So you basically have three statements that you kind of say after that. The first one is a feel. So I understand why you feel that our prices are high. The next one is a felt. A lot of IT managers that I've brought over felt the same way as you do right now. And then found. But once they switched over, they found when you add in the reliability of service, the total cost of ownership, that they actually led to a lower total cost, a little lower total cost of ownership. So that kind of helped them. That kind of resolved their concern initially that the prices were too high. So I think this is a fine tactic if you want to use it. The feel, I'd love, basically, in most of my objections responses, they all start out with I understand. I'm real big on communicating to prospects, really in any disagreement actually, starting out your response with I understand. Like, especially if you're arguing with someone in a personal situation and you're at opposite ends of an argument, start out that argument by saying something like, I understand why you think that group of people is being treated misfairly. It makes complete sense, and I can I understand why you have that belief. So I love the feel part of this, communicating someone that you understand what they're feeling. I think that's a great way to start out any objection response. And the felt and found is kind of like a case study, right? I personally am real big on name dropping. So we worked with this company, and they were in this situation, and they were moved over us, and they were able to achieve this. I love that. So I think this is good if you can develop some of those. I just personally feel like it talks to someone in in a sort of manipulative way, but take that for whatever it's worth. So those are what we did there. We outlined 3 different objection handling responses for you, and gave you some examples for how to do overcoming and how to do redirecting. What you can do from there is you can build a tool called an objections map. And you can build this in an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document, but it's basically 2 columns. And what the left column are the objections that you can anticipate, and you could take some that we've gone through here and then think of some that impact your product on your own. And then the right column is responses for how to deal with those objections. So, I would put some redirects in there. Think about redirects that you can do, questions you can ask as part of redirects. You could also have multiple responses for each objection. So you could have, okay, when I get this on a cold call, I'm going to respond with this redirect. And now the same objection, if it comes up in a meeting, here's my overcome response. So the best practice way to do this is to have multiple responses for the different objections, depending on where you are in the process. One thing that I'm real big on is this concept that I refer to as reflect back to improve moving forward. And so when you can learn something from, I personally believe, every call you make, every meeting you have, every conversation you have, there's something usually to learn from. And so you can reflect back to improve a lot of different things you do. Think about, did I ask the right questions? Could I have done something differently there? But when it comes to objections, you can reflect back and think, what objection did that prospect just throw at me? And then think about, how did you respond? A couple things here. Was the objection something that I should have been prepared for? Was it on the objections map? Did I respond the way that I thought I should have? Or did I? And if you didn't, think about, if I would have responded with the planned response, could I have ended up at a different place? If you responded with the way that you planned on responding, think about, did it work as well as it should have? Should we start to consider another approach, another response? And if the objection you faced was not on your objections map, you might want to think, okay, is that something I'm going to have to face again? Let me get it on the objections map. So this is how you drive continuous improvement. So if you're a manager and you build an objections map for your team, that should be a living, breathing document. A great thing to do there is train your salespeople on dealing with objections, and then on a recurring basis ask them, what objections are you coming across, and in weekly sales meetings or weekly coaching sessions, what objections are you seeing most, and you identifying if there are any that need to be added. That can help you to drive the reflecting back habit in your salespeople from a management standpoint. So that's pretty much it. Some key takeaways. Like I said, you're guaranteed to face objections. You can immediately improve your results by just focusing on this one area. Not only can you improve your results, you can improve basically your mental state. How much fun you're having. How much fun you're having when you're selling. Selling can be fun, right? It's not fun when you're getting beat up and you're getting kicked around out there. But when you can be able to perform like a star quarterback, you pick your favorite football team if you're a sports fan. Think of a quarterback that picks apart a defense. He's studied the playbook, right? So he knows where to put the ball, versus a quarterback who isn't as prepared. So who has more fun? A quarterback that's lighting it up, or one that's getting sacked and throwing interceptions, right? So you can have more fun if you use some of these approaches and some of the tools, meaning the objections map. So that's pretty much it. Just to kind of put a bow around that, to share how Sales Scripter can help you with that, and to kind of share with you what Sales Scripter is. one half of Sales Scripter is basically a methodology. We've given you a glimpse of that here today. These are all the modules or key categories in our methodology. You can see the second one on the left is objections. We have a methodology for how to deal with objections. What we've talked about here today is actually, it spills over into other areas and impacts other areas like cold calling, dealing with qualifying, closing, your sales process. So we have a full methodology that tells you or your salespeople exactly what to do in those areas, just like we have shown you what to do with objections here today. Now, the other half of what we provide is a software application tool set that actually provides cold call scripts, objection responses. It will provide you with your objections map. We talked to you about you building an objections map. Yes, you can do that in Microsoft Word, but our software actually will build you an objections map automatically. And the way that it does that is because, as I mentioned to you, you go back to some of the same places like your pre-qualifying questions and your objection responses. Well, our objection map basically will displays where you should go after it helps you to create your value statement, your qualifying questions and whatnot. But the way that we help people is we provide basically a complete sales training solution. So half of it is our methodology. Now, a lot of salespeople work with us and they access our methodology. And to be honest with you, you can actually probably consume or get access to or review most of our methodology for free, either through these webinars or through our YouTube channel, our ebooks, and whatnot. You can subscribe to some of our live training or sales coaching. Sales managers digest and consume our methodology as well, sometimes in more formal purchased ways, and they push that down to their sales team. We give away a lot of the methodology for free through YouTube and through these webinars, and the reason why we give away a lot for free is that we think that, you know what, if you really love our stuff and the customers that do, then you should and the ones that do will end up using our software as well, because it completely aligns with everything that is in our methodology. So if you like the way we handle cold calling, objections, setting appointments, dealing with gatekeepers, all of that becomes real easy and digestible through using our software platform. And we have salespeople, again, actually a lot of salespeople come in and use our software for free through our free trial. We're okay with that as well. I mean, what we would hope is that you then share that with maybe your manager or your company so that we can help you in a more formal way, because our software and our training can be deployed in a formal, packaged way across an organization, and that's how we sell it to typically sales managers. But the methodology can be accessed through we have 5 ebooks on our website. If you haven't checked them out, you might want to check those out. There's one on cold calling. There's actually one on objections. So one that kind of aligns with this presentation here today, dealing with creating your value proposition, email drip campaigns. The ebooks are free, so check those out. We actually have a book that you can buy that I wrote. It's on Amazon. One of the reasons why the book on Amazon is good for like yourself or to give to your employees is that, and I know me personally, I have tons of ebooks that I end up saving in my email or on my computer that I don't know where they are. And I never end up really reading them as fully as I do when I have a physical paperback book that I can take to the coffee shop or I can leave on my desk. And so that's what's great about the paperback book. It's also designed in a way where there's a chapter on all the key areas, like there's a chapter on dealing with objections. So you can flip to a key chapter. You don't have to read the book from beginning to end. There's a chapter on gatekeepers, objections, voicemail. So it makes it a good reference manual. On YouTube, we actually have most of our full sales training methodology, and it's actually organized into a 4-week new employee sales training program, to where we're real big on treating the brain like a sponge. You don't want to pour too much water on it because it can only absorb so much. So this sales training program is designed to spread it out across 4 weeks. there's basically a module almost each day to watch, and so this can be accessed for free on YouTube today in this format. Some companies actually use these videos as part of their new employee sales training program, and we do deliver this as live training as well for companies. And the neat thing about when we deliver it live, we can custom tailor a lot of these topics for your particular environment. Let me give you an example. So when we're talking about the subject of dealing with objections, we go through, instead of, like, if you notice today, I use some very generic examples. When we teach your salespeople how to deal with objections, we actually use your objection responses. So it makes all these modules much more powerful because it's all your tailored environment. Getting to the software of SalesScripter, the software basically interviews you to set up. It's a library of sales tools, but those sales tools become tailored to your environment when you do enter some information about what you sell, the benefits that it offers, what problems you help to fix, what questions you should ask to see if those problems exist. When you answer those questions, your answers are then used to create immediately cold call scripts, sales prospecting emails, voicemail scripts, and an objections map. This is a screenshot of the objections map that's directly out of SalesScripter. We also provide you with an interactive cold calling display that can be put up in front of yourself or your sales team when they're making calls. This is the display, and so there's big buttons that you can click to get your key questions, to get your voicemail script. On the right side here are actually the objections that you're going to face. So if you hit one of those buttons, the objection response that you need at that particular moment is displayed right in front of you. So this tool really helps with objection handling as well. If you want more help, these are four steps that I recommend you go through. Go to our YouTube channel, check out some of our videos, subscribe to our channel while you're there. Bunch of sales tips and videos. All of these webinars are on our YouTube channel. Go check out some of our books, either ebooks or our paperback book. Sign up for SalesScripter. There's a free 30-day trial. You don't have to pay anything for it. The trial's pretty liberal. I mean, you can really get in, check it out. I mean, if your goal is to you spend zero with us, $0, you can get a lot from us without spending any money, and we are okay with that, because our hope is if we help you, you either this is what we would ask for in exchange. If you're a salesperson and you use us to create your script and to get trained and to get performing better, we ask that you share our company and that you use us with your manager. And that's what we would hope. And anyways, so we do provide coaching, consulting, training. So we provide one-on-one sales coaching if you need help with prospecting, writing a script, using SalesScripter, just general sales coaching. We work with companies from a consulting standpoint, helping them to develop their messaging, their strategy, their processes. And again, we do provide training to companies one-on-one. So that's pretty much it. Here is my contact info if you want to email me with any questions, or if you have any if you need anything else.